right, so I had a meeting invited to me in the morning, and now here I am in the meeting. Kind of have an idea of what this is about. Now, we see the CEO and we see the head of HR. Now, got laid off. I was expecting it. So, not a surprise. What now? So they're gonna send an email in my personal address and information on getting the laptop back. So there's that. And like I said, this was expected for various reasons, and I just gotta say that it is infinitely better to have some notice than it is to just be surprised by it, because I had some time to, mentally and physically, I guess, prepare. Physically meaning like, I got all my reviews and stuff like that in. So like I saved all my peer reviews and stuff like that. So, and important documents that I might need for unemployment. So yeah, got laid off, and I'm gonna end it for now. All right. So what the heck happened? Now, I mentioned earlier that I knew that this was coming, and just to kind of give a little bit of backstory, we had the holiday break. That's the time between Christmas and New Year's, and then people went back to work in 2025. At that time, there was no indication of any issues going on for a handful of weeks. I was an engineering manager at that time, and something happened, which I can't go into too much detail about. Just know that it happened, and I asked my manager about it. My manager's the type that's like super chipper. He's like really direct, and I think most importantly, he responds like really quickly. But to answer my question, he took the entire day, and he wasn't even acting like himself. His response to me, finally, at the end of the day, was just some kind of vague corporate explanation, which was super weird. And that to me was the first sign that I knew something bigger might be happening. Then the following day, that's when we had the first layoff of the year, at the beginning of the year. And it was a pretty big one. You know how I said I was an engineering manager at that time? Well, a lot of people who were reporting to me got laid off. I basically lost most of my team. And I survived the first layoff. But since I barely had a team to manage anymore, guess who went back to being an IC? It means individual contributor. For anyone who's wondering what that means I was back to being an engineer. I was only a manager for about 6 months at that point, so it wasn't too hard for me to get back to the swing of things, of being an engineer again. Of course, the morale wasn't great after that. As I slowly got more information and more clues, my intuition was that most likely more layoffs were probably coming. And I had to figure out if I would be impacted or not. I basically created a whole matrix of different scenarios to try to figure this out. Obviously, I don't want to go into too much detail about the company and numbers and figures and stuff like that. I don't want to dox myself, And there are things that I can't share anyways because, I signed paperwork. But it ultimately boiled down to basically the people who could wear a lot of hats were more likely to be retained because they could do more things. Whereas I mostly work on the front end, and that is a much more specialized role. And being a specialist was not an advantage. So I wasn't optimistic at all. And if you think about it, it really sucks to have to weigh my worth against my peers, especially when these are people who are my friends. And in my analysis, it felt more like I would be more likely to be laid off than I was to be retained in most of my scenarios. So here we are. It happened. I got laid off. And this was about a week ago. Like, as you could see, this was where my laptop used to be. My work laptop used to be, but I already sent it back. And when I got laid off, it was an even bigger layoff than the first round. This is where we had basically several teams working on the product that I was working on. And it was essentially reduced to just a handful of people. Not many people were spared. And in a really messed up way, I actually really appreciate that we essentially have this shared trauma amongst ourselves. And honestly, I would describe the first few days as just pure panic. One of the reasons why is because I'm in my early 40s. I've basically been working continuously for over 20 years of my life, which, includes my first job as a cashier at Macy's when I was 16. And I've never left a job involuntarily before. So it felt like some kind of moral failing for me. I mean, if you have Asian parents and you're raised Catholic, if you know, you know. This was a brand new experience for me and was nearly certain that I would be laid off. It still really hit me when it happened, And with my age, there's also the fear too. There's ageism, especially in tech. It's not great. And it's also not great being a woman in tech. My coworkers, who are now my former coworkers, probably the best group of people I've ever worked with in any job. And they're just so super supportive and they're just awesome. And that's why it kind of hurts that we don't have this anymore. Yeah, previous experience weren't so great. And yeah, it just sucks to see this end. You know what I mean? And honestly, that's one of the reasons I made the move into management, because of my age. Didn't realize I was gonna tear up. But anyways, yeah, that's why I wanted to move into management, because of my age. Now I'm worried. Am I even going to be able to find a job? Is there going to be bias against me? Just pick one, I'm an Asian woman in tech, and I'm not a spring chicken either. So am I going to be able to find something? I don't know, So yeah, it was a lot of panicking and crying in the first few days. And I was just ranting about it to whoever would listen, mostly my husband, because, he doesn't have a choice. I realized it's okay because I needed to give myself some grace. And if this happened to you or is happening to you, just give yourself the permission to feel what you need to feel about it and give yourself some time to rest. After the first few days, I was panicking and then finally calmed down. And then once I calmed down, I was just spending the next few days just doing nothing, nothing productive, just vegging out, working on jigsaw puzzles, listening podcasts, going on walks, screaming into the shower, For me, even though I knew this was coming, I also frequently had to remind myself that it just wasn't something I could control. The things I could control was preparing for it, to give myself the softest landing I can. And even though I was in freakout mode as it was happening, I was able to get back into control because that's when I put my plan into place. And yeah, I had a plan ready prior to being laid off. That's why I did all that matrix stuff. Essentially had a soft launch right after the January layoffs without realizing it. And that it started by hoarding all my money. Anything that was unnecessary was just cut at the time. And any subscriptions, eating out, shopping, and stop buying all this freaking camera gear. I had a worst case scenario list where if I did get laid off, like what would I do? And it was basically the plan of getting all the documents for unemployment and stuff like that. And then also like looking to healthcare plans. And this is where I already knew, like, as I was getting laid off, like, okay, I got to sign up for like the state plan because I already like did all the research. And having a good idea of what costs would be if I had to start living off of unemployment, or if it takes a long time to find a job, if I had to start dipping into my savings, what would that look like? I don't know. Maybe I'll make another video talk about my budget and finances. And part of that's because like knowing what's coming is just super important. And that's why I'm much calmer right now. And now that we're here, a lot of the cost cutting has already been put into place. So I don't have to do a ton there. And for my mental health, of course, I'm keeping in touch with the coworkers who left or who got laid off before I did. And then, of course, I'm talking to, keeping in touch with the people in my cohort, layoff cohort, because this is collective trauma we're experiencing together here. There's just a comfort of being with people who could just understand what you're going through without explaining it to them. You know what I mean? Because they're going through the same thing. I'm talking to friends and family about it. Not my parents, because like I don't want to deal with their questions right now. But the number one goal right now is to start, or rather continue, talking to my network so I could let people know that I'm available and I'm starting the job hunt. This is kind of ironic because if you've been following my channel at all, you'd know that my previous content was about AI replacing programmers or how to get a tech job. And right before I got laid off, I was actually working on a video essay on what's going on with the tech job market right now and how much it sucks. And that might seem ironic to some people, but there was a shift in my channel at that time. And that direction was done intentionally because it was essentially put into place after the layoffs in January. I was intentionally researching and creating this content for myself and for some of my coworkers. And yeah, I even filmed my reaction in my mind, in my warped mind. I was like, this would be good content. and ooh, I could make one of those cliched videos, But it's completely different when it actually happens to you. And maybe some people might want to ask me, why don't you just go full-time on YouTube? And my answer is, hell no. I'm not even monetized right now. But it would probably take me many years to break even with my tech salary to what I could potentially earn as a full-time creator, if I even get there. And I'm just too risk adverse for that. The economy is just like too uncertain for me right now that I need some kind of employment for income, obviously, but also for health insurance, because I live in the US and you're basically an accident away from bankruptcy if you don't have health insurance. I'm just gonna keep doing this as a hobby. This is what I consider cheap entertainment at this point. If you don't count the startup costs for the cameras and stuff, because I already paid for them when I had a job, so I'm not counting it. So don't count that. But to be honest, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this footage. It feels a little like too raw for me to be publishing it right now. I'm actually not even sure if this video would even see the light of day, but I'm doing it because it's great free therapy. So we'll see. And the good news is I do have some promising leads from my network, and I have some interviews scheduled with recruiters, and I'm hoping it goes somewhere. And maybe I'll make some updates. I don't know, maybe not. I need to consult my journal. But I have a plan, and I'm doing the things that I can, that's in my control. I'm allowing myself to feel when I need to feel, talking to the people I need to talk to for my mental health, for networking. There are things in motion, and everything's going to be okay, right? Maybe, hopefully. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, bye.